People are often under the assumption that they've healed their past and their past doesn't bother them. But then they're wondering why relationships keep not working, why their health is unwell, why things keep triggering them, why something that happened with their dad is still kind of happening in relationships now. We kind of start to, we wonder why that's going on. But then if you ask someone, they go, I'm healed. What I have seen, the number one thing that I have seen with cancer patients who come to me is the number one reoccurring theme is that they are in so much denial that something from the past still bothers them, which obviously and clearly it does, because they would not be experiencing cancer if it did not. So, and I've seen this with my dad too. I've seen this with friends' parents who have experienced cancer. They are so in denial that something from the past is still affecting them to this day. And when we're that in denial for so many years, we're not healing it, we're not shifting, we're not healing, we're not shifting, that then turns into cancer, some kind of disease or ailment in the body, and a lot of other shit in life not working out. I see it with my dad, he's never been able to make the money he wants to make. He's never been able to have the life he wants to live, XYZ. We'll get into why on that later. The truth is that truly healing from the past is something that most people don't get to do. They may address a certain component or two, but they're missing a lot of pieces. When we have a pattern in our lives, it's like throwing a stone in a lake, okay? Have you ever skipped a stone in a lake growing up, or a puddle, or a body of water? You throw it initially and there's a tiny little burst when it goes in. Then there's fast ripples right after, but then the ripples keep getting wider and further out, but they still keep going. And the ripples are now so far out, but now they're so fucking big. At first it's just one little splash. Then you keep going and now it's fucking 25 ripples, and they're now wider and bigger than the first initial splash, okay? So this is kind of how trauma works. And now, real quick, no trauma is better or worse, okay? I need us to remember that. No trauma ever is better or worse. Everyone's soul chooses its own level 10 trauma before coming into this life. So you can free yourself of two things. One, gaslighting yourself that other people have it worse. And two, thinking that other people had it easier so they get an easier life. My level 10 trauma might not be the same as Sarah's level 10 trauma, right? If I went in Sarah's life, that might have been level 6 trauma for me. If she went in my life, that might have been level 4 trauma for her. Everyone's level of trauma is very different. Okay, so that's something very important to remember. Even something like someone laughing at you on stage when you were 5 years old is just as traumatic for some souls as getting sexually abused. I know it's wild, but it's how it affects us that's just as traumatic. So we cannot compare better or worse, good or bad. They had it easier, they had it harder, whatever. Okay, so that can set you free and clear of gaslighting yourself and of being in the victim role. So for example, if you have a fear of speaking your truth, of speaking up, of feeling like you're allowed to say what you need to say, of being seen when you speak, memories can, well, actually, we'll get to the memories part in a second. So love is the center of emotion that we have. That is when we are in complete balance and neutrality. That is when we're seeing an equal amount of positives and an equal amount of negatives at the same time, okay? So if our soul self in that moment has fallen out of an emotion of love, we are now unlimited. So let's say, you have a time when you're 5 years old and you were on stage and you're speaking, okay? And you're presenting a project, okay? And so not even on stage, maybe in front of your classroom, it doesn't have to be on stage. In front of your classroom, you're presenting a project and you hear two kids laughing. Maybe they're not even laughing at you, but you've just now decided they're laughing at you. Now, all of a sudden you have this fear that now they are laughing at you, that now you're bad at speaking, that now like you're horrible at it. Our soul self in that moment has now, it's literally happened to me. I figured this is like a common thing. So I feel like this is like a good example to use. We'll get to there. Okay, I've had the same thing. So our soul self in that moment has fallen out of the emotion of love. We have felt limited, right? So then in this same moment, fired up is our fight or flight system. And this moment has so much emotion attached to it. Now we start to store the memory. It then starts to become a part of a neural network, and it becomes a significant event, and it becomes easy to find in the brain. So it becomes a significant memory that we constantly think of. This out of balance memory is now hijacking our creator field, and it's causing people, situations, events to act out the same thing that we're feeling, just like we talked about with the law of reflections yesterday. So the brain is so quick to assess situations, it will then find other ways in other areas of lives to continue to write the script. So now maybe, it's not public speaking problem with, now maybe in your relationship you feel like you can't speak up. Now maybe you feel like if you speak up trying to present a project at work, you feel embarrassed, you feel like no one cares what you have to say. Now maybe you go and try and express your emotions and you just feel like no one wants to hear what I'm talking about, okay? So the ripples from the stone, right? The original root cause, which is the stone getting into the water, causes the cycles that we then create. It's no longer now about getting up in front of a crowd. Now it's showing up in a relationship. Now it's showing up in business. Now it's showing up in finances. Now it's showing up in this, that, and the fucking other thing, okay? Because we don't overcome it in our creator field, it continues to create more events there, and every time it comes up, it gets bigger. Just like how initially you throw the stone, there's little waves. Then they start getting fucking bigger and bigger and bigger. The more we ignore it, the louder it gets. The more we ignore it, the louder it gets. So, for example, if the initial thing, if it could be like, oh, you couldn't think of words to say, right? You couldn't think of words to say when you were presenting your project when you were 5. Years and years and years later into your adulthood, that could turn into a thyroid problem, because thyroid is in your throat, right? And throat is expression. So if you feel like you can't express, that could turn into a thyroid problem. For every single time we experience one of these ripples, what tends to happen is it reaffirms the memories from our past, and then it amplifies the problem even more. So it's like, oh, when I got on stage when I was 5, they laughed at me. And so now I'm going to get laughed at. And so now I'm creating a creator field where I'm going to have a problem speaking up because I'm already afraid they're going to laugh at me. Now I could hear someone laughing from the distance of something I'm saying and think they're laughing at me. I've had this thing, this is an example from my own literal life. And it caused problems in my lungs, and I'll explain why in a second. But they're healed now. Don't worry, I'm fine. But do not worry, she's okay. So what happened was this was less about a classroom, more about my family life growing up. When I would say something to my mom or dad, my dad would completely just kind of be manipulative. My mom would then tell me that I was wrong and to apologize for my dad to making him upset. So real quick, I learned expression, not good, scary, people tell me I'm wrong, people don't take me seriously, blah, blah, blah. So then your girl thinks she healed this. I'm like 24 at this point, I'm 28 now, I'm 24 at this point, I'm like, oh, I have healed this. Nope, I got into a relationship. If you think you've healed something, get into a romantic relationship, and that will expose all the things that you have not healed yet. And so yes, I healed it in being able to speak up and talk, and I had my business at that time, and I had no problem making videos, blah, 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 XYZ. However, in romantic relationship, we had some problems. Literally, Justin, I would create this, and Justin would start laughing when I would try to express myself. Or he would like laughing, thinking I was cute, or like not taking me seriously. Or he would like try and tell me that I shouldn't feel that way. And I know you're like, oh my God, that's so manipulative. No. My creator field was creating this because the second I stopped doing that, he stopped. what we don't realize is we truly have complete control over how other people are being toward us. And we're so quick to like leave a situation, leave a relationship. We'll get more on that later, because we're going, oh, they're gaslighting me, they're toxic, they're blah, 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 blah. But we're not taking responsibility for the part of us that's making ourselves a match to that, right? And this could be two things. Either one, we are literally making ourselves a match for this person to treat us and only us this way, and they treat everyone else fine. Or two, and when we shift, they'll shift. Or two, we'll shift, they'll still be in their own shit, but we won't be triggered anymore. Then we can move on from a neutral place versus moving on because they don't value me. They don't see my whatever, whatever, whatever. And when we move on from a place of they don't value me, I don't feel heard, we're just gonna keep recreating the same problem. It's just gonna be triggering that stone initial reaction in the lake that happened when you were 5 or whenever it happened, okay? So for every single time we experience one of these ripples, it reaffirms the memories from our past and it amplifies the problem even more. If I feel like I'm not heard, which is what my problem was, it developed into lung issues. If we don't feel like we have a right lung issues, like asthma, I had asthma like insanely bad, like in the hospital constantly for it, like literally would just get it randomly, it seemed like out of nowhere. Started when I was 3, which is wild. If we feel like we don't have the right to be heard, and it's popped up into every other area and we've ignored it, like that will affect the lungs. It will affect even our body at that point too. And I'll get into more science portion of this of how it affects the body and like why we can know that and see that. But if it comes up in relationships, like I was just talking about, instead of learning the lesson, most people break up with them, right? Most people break up and move on. Most people go, oh, that job didn't value me, let me move on to the next. Oh, that man or woman didn't value me, let me move on to the next. And of course there is a time to, yes, move. You don't want to torture yourself, but what happens is we move on to the next and we don't solve the problem. We move on to the next and think the outside's going to solve the problem for us. And that is taking our hand, putting it in our fucking soul, giving our soul and power away for free, okay? If we think the next person or the next thing or the next this or the next that or the next income or the next whatever is going to solve the problem, it never will.